Welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. Today we have a special guest. This is Stephanie Brennan, and she works here at Quilt Addicts Anonymous. She answers a lot of your email questions, social media, makes a lot of our samples, but you actually went to school to learn how to sew.
I did. I went to Ball State University.
And your degree is in apparel design, right?
Yep.
So when we brought Stephanie on last fall, I knew I wanted to expand into more things than just quilting. So this is going to be the first of those series. I've sewn a lot of garments, but I've kind of figured things out as I go. Stephanie actually knows what she's doing. And so she's created two patterns for us for pull-on skirts. One is just a super simple one with elastic going all around, and we made some kids skirts with that. So we're going to have a whole series just on that. And then the second series is one that has a flat front waistband. It's actually the one that's right behind me. This one's going to be mine. She made it for me. I'm so excited.
I did.
And then the back is elastic. So it's pull-on, no zippers. It's perfect for beginners. And we're going to walk you through all the steps the way we do for all of our other series and courses that we have. So I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited.
Alrighty, so step number one with all of these is talking about the supplies you need. We've got a lot out here. You don't need everything to get started. So obviously the first thing you need is a sewing machine. And this doesn't have to be a super top of the line sewing machine. You don't need a serger. We're going to teach you to do a French seam.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun. But like, what are some specific things that you would want to look for in a sewing machine if, say, you don't have one?
Well, if you're doing just very, very intro, like very beginning garment sewing, you don't need like super top of the line. You don't need a bunch of fancy stitches. You want one that has a really good straight stitch, back stitch, one that's going to be durable. Yeah, you really don't need anything fancy.
Yeah, a zigzag can be nice.
Yeah.
And most of them also have overlocking stitches built in, which are not as good of as a serger, but it'll work. So,
yeah.
But sergers are very fun.
They are.
I got one recently. I very much enjoyed it. But
yeah, they're fun.
But they're like,
they're a different animal.
They're a different animal, and their price point is a whole different starting price point than sewing machines. So you can just see how you like it first, and then see if you need that thing. We're gonna have a whole video on fabric. Obviously, you need fabric. This is a cotton lawn from Free Spirit. This is kind of what inspired the Okay, Let's Do It in this fabric series. Anna Maria Horner came out with a line of lawns. And cotton lawn, for those of you who aren't familiar, it can be used in quilts, but it has a lighter feel and it's more drapey.
Yeah, it's a lot drapier. It's a lot more flowy. It's a lot more what you think of when you think of like your summer skirts.
So we're going to have, like I said, our next video in the series is specifically about what quilting cottons will work for garments, but lawn is good. You can get that from several manufacturers. There's several manufacturers that also do rayons. I know that Cotton and Steel and RJR both do that. And also we're going to talk a little bit about some of the fabric companies that print on shirting, which is a little bit drapier. Again, still totally works just fine in quilts, but also is okay for that. So mostly you want something that's going to drape, right? We don't want the stiff ness that we get in quilting cotton.
Right. So what we mean by drape is just how it hangs off of the body, and what it does when it's not on something structured. So when you're looking at the fabric, if you hold it over your hand and see how it behaves. So you can see it's very lightweight. It's going to move a lot. So
a lot of this is going to be by feel. You might have stuff that you could use within your stash already. And sometimes, you can have some fun with it. Like, I think a lot of the 108-inch wide backs would make fabulous maxi dresses.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Another thing you might want to consider is whether or not you need a lining, because sometimes it might be just a little too thin and you don't want to see your underoos.
Yes.
We don't want to do that. So just consider that. We lined ours. All right, so this skirt, both of them are using elastic. One is going to use it all the way around, and one is just going to be in the back, so it has like a nice finished look to the front. But there's lots of different kinds of elastic and lots of different widths, so it's really important that you're paying attention to your pattern to know what you need. We have a couple here. They're all knit, I believe.
Well,
this one's not.
Right.
So knit elastic, you can cut straight down the center, right?
Yes.
A lot of people are doing that with mass. If you had like 1/2 inch like this and you needed 1/4 inch, people would just cut straight down the center. It would be okay. This is woven, right?
Yeah.
So you can't do that. So what are we using?
Well, for this one, you really could use, the more important thing is the width. I used this woven one. So this is a lot stiffer. It's going to hold a lot more shape as it's across your back on the back of the skirt. You can use a knit one as long as it is an inch wide, but just know that it's not going to be as stiff. It's not going to hold its shape as well.
I have buttonhole elastic a lot in my kids' clothes that we use a lot. And that's always knit. And I feel like it turns more.
It does.
Because it just isn't as...
It's a lot more flexible. It's a lot more... It's made to move more, I think, whereas the woven is going to hold its shape as it stretches in one direction.
So either's fine.
Yeah.
But they do different things. So that's important to know. Now, the only other thing... There's a couple other things you absolutely have to have. But one of them is thread to match. I know I always use like white for everything when I'm quilting. But you can't do that with garment fabric.
Right. Yeah, you definitely want your thread to match. It doesn't have to be a perfect match, but if you, like with this skirt here, I mean, you could use a dark blue, dark gray, you can use a black. I would not use the white, but any of these darker colors is going to blend with it really well.
And I do this like not just for the seams that show, like your hemlines, I do it for the sides too, because I feel like there's more pressure put on a garment and you're going to see those threads more than you would for piecing.
Yeah, as it's on your body and you're moving around, the seams are going to stretch and they're going to contort differently, so you're going to see that thread a little bit more.
And for what we're doing, like if you're using quilting cottons or the shirtings, your standard aurifil is totally fine to work with. But if you get super into garment sewing, you might want to consider what thread you're using to the fabric you're using. Like when I made my daughter's baptism dress, it was all using silk, so I used silk thread. And so you just want to kind of consider your application, what you're doing, and what is maybe the best thread for that. All right, so I know you always cringe a little when I cut my patterns out with a rotary cutter.
I kind of do, yeah.
You do, yeah. I do it all the time just because that's the easiest thing for me to do is just to go whip around with it. But you use the shears for everything.
I do. If I'm cutting out patterns, I like to use scissors. That's just what I'm more comfortable with. It's what I've trained on. I also, another difference that you and I do, I like to pin my patterns in place, whereas you like to just put weights on it. And I think one thing that I like to do, I've found, is I like to move the pattern around as I'm cutting it so I can get a good angle, whereas you will just hold it in place and
kind of, whatever needs to be done to get it to go.
So both are fine. There's no right or wrong answer here. It's just whatever you are comfortable with. Maybe for very beginners, I would say use the scissors because it's easier to get those more precise cuts. But I mean, if you're comfortable and confident with a rotary cutter, go for it.
Now, this is the instance where you need the good fabric scissors.
Yes.
That you will consider it a reason for divorce if your husband uses them for anything other than fabric. Because
do not touch the fabric scissors.
It has to be good. You have to be able to get in there, and any fabric scissors are fine. Gingers like the top of the line. And you can get them sharpened. So like if you buy a pair of gingers and you take care of them, that could be the last pair of scissors you ever own for fabric. But anywhere along the lines are fine. Just don't catch anybody else trying to open plastic packaging with it.
Yeah.
Or they're not going to work very well. I also really like to have embroidery scissors or these micro tip scissors on hand for when you're cutting little things. And especially, we won't do it in this pattern, but if you have to cut
notches
seam, notches. And I love these because there is a spring action to it, so it pops open on its own. And then you just kind of secure it in place when you're done. And I think that's a lot easier, especially if you have hand issues. But I've also seen people just get the pinking blade for the rotary cutter and go around and achieve the same thing. And you wouldn't want to do that for something that's like heirloom.
Right.
But if you're doing a bunch of bibs, go for it. Yeah. Have some fun. All right, so we just talked about pins. I typically, I use them when I'm pinning things together, but not to pin the pattern.
Yeah.
But there are multiple different types of pins out there. I do use my quilting pins for everything, but they are thicker. So it's not always the best depending on what fabric you're working with. A lot of people really like these glass heads.
Yeah, a lot of people do. I tend to prefer the quilting pins because maybe I'm just more used to them now, or I can see them better because they are even the length.
It's longer.
Yeah. I also have children. I know you do. And if it falls on the floor, it's not going to roll and get lost because of the flat head. on there, but either one is going to work. So again, just find what you're more comfortable with. If you're using a finer fabric, one that's thinner or a lot more drapey, the smaller one is going to work better. I would say pretty much for anything else, the flat quilting pins.
There are sometimes too when you might want to get like really specialty pins. I know when I made my first daughter's baptism gown, I got ones that were like ballpoint, because I was using a ballpoint needle and the bridal satin, and I got the pins that were specific to that. And I just remember like my fingers were like bleeding by the end of it, and I'm just like, don't bleed on the white, don't do it.
Yes.
But it's like, you know, you might need to, if you're doing something super special and out of the ordinary, you may need to get a whole set of pins to go with that too. But again, either of these will work to start. Go ahead, use them, you're good. All right, so next up is marking tools. Now, I think we probably have all started with this paper and the tracing wheel. I could never, ever get that to work for me. But you used it successfully yesterday.
I did. Like, this is what I was trained on, what I first used. And I mean, it really, the paper makes a big difference. It has a chalky substance on it so that you can lay it on your fabric and then you use your tracing wheel to go over it, like if you're tracing a dart. And so you want to find one that is a contrasting color, and then it'll just wipe right off. So we'll go over it in more detail when we actually do it, but this is probably one of my favorites.
So another thing that you can do, there's plenty. If you already have some friction gel pens, that's a great way to mark. I like to mark like placement lines on this, or like whenever I have to do pleats, I use this a lot. We have 3 different colors of this, and it goes away with heat, but you do want to test that, because occasionally it will leave like a little bit of a light shadow, which is no big deal when you're marking like the back of a piece of quilting cotton, but it would be a big deal if it was like dead center in your garment.
If you're marking center front or something, we don't want that.
We don't want that. So test it in an inconspicuous spot, like some part you're not going to use, iron it, see if it leaves like the shadow of the line, because it does go away. It's just sometimes it's just a little bit lighter. So check that out. I also love these Soebbing pens. The eraser's trash, that's not going to work. But it comes with white chalk, so that's great for marking on dark items. And then also there's Taylor's chalk that you can get. Yeah. And I had some fun playing with that. I like to experiment. I like, at this point, the quilting I do, like I know how it's going to turn out. It's going to turn out the way I think it's going to turn out in most cases. And so like the challenge and the interesting part for me is figuring out, well, how am I going to get this garment to work? So like I texted you the other day, I was like, I woke up at 5 a.m. and I've taught myself how to knife pleat, and that's why I bought this at 5 in the morning on Amazon. And I'm going to use it this weekend because it's a fun new thing. So if you're also at that point, you can still super enjoy quilting, and you can also be challenged by something else that's new and different, and still use your stash. All right, so measurement.
Yes.
Obviously measurement matters.
Yes.
Because if it's too big, you're going to be swimming in it, and if it's too small, it won't fit.
Right. Yeah, you need some really good measuring tools. Probably the single most important one, I would say you need some kind of just straight standard measuring tape. So you can use this measuring tape. There are some rulers that just have this part where it's a grid, but you need something
that can go around the body.
Yes. If you only get one measuring tool, get one of those.
You can totally cheat and do like a piece of yarn
around,
okay,
that's true.
But like it's not the same.
Yeah.
Like it just isn't, like you're not like pulling it to see, okay, is that it or not? And it's just, they're cheap. They're not a lot. If you have a 108 because you're a quilter, that's fine. But 60 is totally fine, and that'll do you just fine. But there's also lots of other fun things that you can get. But you don't need it to start. I've been sewing garments since my kids were itty bitty, and she's 8 now, so 8 years, and I just purchased these things. These I've had, but I just purchased these. They are fun. They're more for like when you start to change pattern sizes.
Yes.
They're really helpful.
Yeah, if you're altering patterns, if you're making patterns, if you're changing your pattern size, you can trace this along and keep that same curve. You can use this one for necklines, arms, eyes, all that fun stuff. But these are definitely something that you don't need to begin with. They're fun, but you can get away with not having them.
I know you're not a fan of this.
I couldn't
had some fun with it though. I mostly like when I was trying to figure out if I had transferred armhole sizes correctly.
Yeah.
I don't know that we'll carry all these things. And I don't even honestly know what this is called. But they're fun little extra things. One of these are essential though.
Yeah. All right. So I've been using this seam gauge for a while, and You can move this around so so if you want to look, you measure your 1/2 inch seam, you can look on here really quickly. It's just very easy to kind of slide it back and forth and see what you're looking for. I think this is more of a quilter.
It probably is.
Maybe because
But I have 100% used that for garments too.
Okay.
But this is a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah, I have not used, I've seen these around. I have not used them. I've used this many, many times.
Yeah, this is super easy because you just line it up like you got your 1 inch seam allowance. So this goes with the fold, and then this goes with where it gets turned under, and it's just,
Yeah.
it's so easy.
Yeah.
All right, so obviously pressing is incredibly important whenever you're sewing,
Yes.
but also in garment making, because a lot of times the way you press a seam can forever alter the way that it sits on the body.
And darts, especially any kind of shaping tools, you want to really make sure to press those carefully.
So there's all kinds of tools and things that you can use, and we'll talk about them as we get further on. But an iron, and if you don't like putting water in your iron like I don't, a spray mister is perfect because you do need steam when you are garment sewing.
Yes.
Even just when you're pressing the fabric, you need steam or some sort of starch a lot of times in order to get it to do what you need to do. You don't need the most expensive iron out there.
Right.
And this is important. I know, like if we're quilters, we just always have it on this cotton setting. But you're going to want to pay attention to your fabric content and make sure that you have your iron set to the correct setting. Otherwise, you could melt your fabric and ruin it.
Yeah, we don't want that.
I've done that.
I've seen it happen.
I've done it.
I don't think I have. I've seen it happen many times.
It's what happens when you have like a silk outer and a poly lining.
Yeah.
You melt that lining real quick. So we talked about how there's tools that can help you press a little better. I just bought this clapper.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to try to make a knife pleated skirt for my daughter that fits her perfectly for her school uniform. And what you do with this is you set it on the seam when it's hot and the heat absorbs into the wood, and then it's supposed to be permanently pleated. I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes. There's also things called hams that are used a lot of times when you're pressing sleeves, right? Sleeves and darts.
Anytime there's a curve, so like, darts, pleats, sleeves, if you have something with princess seams that have that curve on there, anytime you want to press that curve and get it nice and smooth, you want to use some kind of a ham.
And some of those are also filled with sawdust, right? Because the heat absorbs and then it just is set.
Yeah, and they come in a variety of different sizes. You don't need it at the very, very beginning, but you do need something. So a lot of times if you just roll up a towel.
We grabbed this from my linen closet this morning. So it's totally doable to do other things. So one of the last things we want to talk about is interfacing. We are going to use a little bit of it in the pull-on skirt with the flat front waistband just to give it a little bit of dimension. And that's all it does, right?
Yeah. It just stiffens the fabric so that it holds its shape better.
But when you go to the store, you're going to see an entire shelf full of interfacing. And they all do different things, but they all look kind of the same. So it can be a little intimidating.
Right.
We pulled just 4 that we have here just to kind of talk about when you might use it and if you just want to steer clear for garments. This first one is SF 101. That's a really popular one. I believe it's 22 inches wide. It's one you're going to see a lot, and it can definitely be used for garments.
Yeah. Now, is this one, I know I prefer fusible interfacing.
This one is. So there's fusible and there's sew-in. And I think most people do fusible unless you're trying to do like couture stuff.
Right. It's a whole different ball game when we're talking about non-fusible. So fusible interfacing, that's what we're going to be using.
Yes, and we'll show you how to use it later. Another one, like we have the staple sewing aids. This one we use for t-shirt quilts. It is it's not quite as stiff, but you could use both. Both of them will be fine. It just, you might want to give it a try and see like, how much stiffness do you need? Because this one is not as stiff as this one. And so depending on what substrate you're working with, substrate is another word for your base cotton, by the way, you might need a different application. All right.
And typically your pattern will tell you what type of interfacing works well with it. Because it's not like like this fabric always needs this interfacing. Like the interfacing will work with multiple ones. So it'll tell you like if you're using these types of fabrics, use this kind of interfacing. If you're using this kind, use this kind of interfacing. So look at your pattern, also look at your fabric.
So now we're going to look at some that you wouldn't want to use, at least in this project. This is Decor Bond. It is a non-woven interfacing. It's great for home decor projects, and it's great for bags.
We love it for bags.
You would never want to use it in a garment. Almost never.
No.
I can't see any reason why you would want, like, look, this is stiff.
Yeah.
That
even
holds
in a
up
shirt
on its
collar, which
own.
is like usually your stiffest garment, like shirt collars or sleeves, like even that, like
It would do too much. And then this is fusible fleece. This is also used in bags, home decor projects. I did use this for my daughter's jacket. I made her a coat using a boussole.
Yeah.
And it was from a chain store, so it was not very thick. And I thought I want this to actually be functional in the wintertime. And so I did do an interlining of this, so that way it would actually be warm for her. So, and I'm sure this is not, probably somebody who actually knows how to make coats is going to look at me and be like, you use fusible fleece on the inside of a very nice coat for your child? And I'm like, yes, I did. So, you know,
do what works.
You do. So we have one little funsy thing that we're going to share with you. And again, this is not something you absolutely need to have to start with. And I don't even know if we're going to sell it because it's a really weird shaped thing to ship. But if we don't sell it, if anything that we don't sell in this video, we'll put a link in our video description to where you can get it on Amazon. It will be an affiliate link because, you know, gotta eat. So this is a pattern tracing paper, and I turned you onto this. I think you love it as much as I do.
I've kind of fallen in love with it. So.
It's fabulous. It's a non-woven material, but it's very see-through, so it's great for tracing. And I love it because it's like you could sew it. Like I have sewn stuff to see if it fit with it, but I like, because I have 2 kids and they're both girls, and I want to remake patterns because they're expensive and sometimes they go out of print. So I can just trace the size I need on there. And like I've got this all labeled. It's with what pattern it is, that I've cut 2, it's sleeve C, and I just love this stuff.
Yeah.
So those are the biggies. And like we said, you don't have to start with everything. What do we absolutely need? We need a sewing machine.
Sewing machine, scissors, measuring tool, marking tool.
Yes.
And pins.
Pins.
So 5 things.
An iron.
Yeah. Okay, 6 things.
You probably already have an iron.
Yeah.
And your iron that you have at home for clothes is going to be totally fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, so do you need all the things? No, you do not. As you amass things and you want to add things on, like maybe when you get to the hemming part, you're like, okay, I need that seam gauge now. This is a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
You know, those are the things where you're like, okay, that's it. But now when you go to the store or you order from us, you kind of have an idea of what they are and what they do. So that's the big important part. Next up, we are going to be talking all about fabric substrates. So we're going to talk about some quilting cottons that you can use for garments, and just some other things that are out there available on the market too that you could use. But of course, we always love it when you get the supplies from us, because that helps us be able to make new videos for you guys. So if you are just seeing this video and you don't know what we're doing, it's our Intro to Garment Sewing, and you're going to be able to take the course for free on our website, shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. And if you download the pattern, then we will send you these videos in your inbox in real time as we're taking it, or if it's later, you'll just get them kind of like on a weekly basis. So that way you can see what you're working on this week, and you can maybe have a sewing day on the weekend and get through them. So it'll be super fun, and 2 different types of skirts, plus kind of a wrap up where we kind of do a little show and tell.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thanks so much for following us. And until next time, you ready to say it with me? Happy quilting!
Happy quilting!